Hi, everybody. This is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com, and I am here with G-Man, and we are going to do a really exciting debate review. We're going to review the debate that was not too long ago between Inspiring Philosophy, who is Michael Jones, and Jim Majors. And Jim Majors is formerly of the Atheist Republic. And so I believe it was the Atheist Republic, or it's some atheist group he was associated with, but they debated on the gospel truth. And they debated on this topic of, was Jesus buried in a tomb? Now, the short answer is yes. right, G-Man? So we're going to go for the longer answer. So we'll see how well Jim Majors and Michael Jones did in this debate. We're actually going to start off kind of in the middle of the debate because we feel like they recapped a lot of their major points towards the middle of the debate. So we're going to do that. But before we do, let's go ahead and let me have G-Man introduce himself and let everybody know how they can get in touch with you. And I know I've got you in the description, but beyond that.
All right, cool. So first and foremost, can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Eshe?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is G-Man. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a Christian apologist here on YouTube, and I have a channel called the G-Man channel. I also have another channel called the GTV channel, and on the G-Man channel, I primarily do apologetics against the Hebrew Israelites, whereas on GTV, I deal with the atheist community. I have a lot of experience with dealing with the atheist community. I'm familiar with a lot of their arguments, and if you want to check me out, just type in G-Man, and my face will show up.
Yes, good. And so I also wanted to ask you, I noticed that this week, before we get into this video, I noticed that this week you were going into a lot of videos like against Dragnot and some other people. So it seems like there's an online sort of a war between you and a few of these other atheists. Is that true, would you say?
Oh yeah, that's a great way to put it. There is a war actually going on. And believe it or not, the atheists are actually helping me because on the one hand, they're arguing that they're these upright, moral people and we should follow their example. And on the other end, if you saw the things that they were doing, you wouldn't even recommend your worst enemy act like them. So, they're actually helping, and I think I'm doing a decent job at exposing them on this and trying to get some of them to think a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's the whole thing. When you think, if you think through a lot of the way the world is in so many ways, it leads us to God. And then if you want to have a more specific revelation and look into the Gospels, that'll lead us to Jesus, which is basically kind of related to our topic today.
Exactly. The Gospels is great. The Bible is great. Preaching is great. We have history on our side. We got a lot of things on our side that bring somebody to God if they're being intellectually honest about what they're looking at.
Exactly. Yeah, if they're being honest with what they're looking at, because it's in all honesty, it's the truth. Now, before we get into this debate, was Jesus buried in a tomb? And let's just point out really quickly that all four of the gospel authors indicated that Jesus was buried in a tomb. And Paul, a lot of people like to deny that Paul indicated it, but it makes it pretty clear that Paul said that Jesus was buried. And we have he was connected to Peter, he was connected to John. There's no reason that Paul would have said, no, he was buried in some mass grave or something like that. So this mass grave hypothesis is new. And I also want to point out that Matthew, in the book of Matthew makes it really clear that after they found that the tomb was empty, the Jewish people decided to craft a story that somebody had stolen the body. And so they didn't say there was no body, there was no tomb. They basically said that somebody stole the body from the tomb. So the idea is, guess what? There is an empty tomb. And so we pretty much already ended this, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And honestly, if you look at the behavior of the apostles before Jesus was buried, and then you look at their behavior after he rose from the dead, and you do a good job arguing this, you can see that that's a bunch of baloney what the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin tried to say during that time.
Yeah, they were in hiding. They were scared. Peter denied him 3 times, and suddenly they came out of hiding and they preached for decades, despite being persecuted and beaten and jailed and imprisoned. And so it's pretty bad. I want to before we go, I want to say hi to all the people in the chat. So I see Let's Get Biblical, Sup, Kabat Muhammad, who apparently must be a Muslim. So we've got a Muslim in the chat. Let's Get Biblical, Stephen Rivard, and he wants to know, actually, before we go to this, he wants to know why we reject Muhammad as a prophet. Did you want to answer that? Because your father is Muslim, right?
Yeah, my father is, and my stepdad was. The reason why I reject Muhammad as a prophet, because the man's never made any prophecies. And if he did make any prophecy, none of them came to pass. There's a lot of problems, and I mean a lot of problems with Islam. And I'm more than happy to have you come on this YouTube channel. We can talk about them sometimes, particularly the things that are written in the Quran, the behavior of the Muslims in our society, and their weird writings on what's going to happen when you die. Sharia law. We can talk about what your reward is. The 70 virgins. We can talk about all those good things and why those things do not make a man righteous. Since you claim
Okay.
that you're coming out of the Abrahamic faiths, I have no problem having that conversation with you.
So we could have that conversation, and you have more exposure to the Muslim faith than I do, for sure. I've got a lot of Muslim students, but that's about it. I don't have a Muslim parent or anything like that. And so I would go with probably what you're saying. And the other thing that is in there is it's very vague in the Quran as far as Jesus's crucifixion. It's my understanding that many Muslims have the understanding that some other guy basically took Jesus' place and said nothing, and that Jesus was taken to heaven by God prior to the crucifixion. And so that essentially rules out Christianity altogether, because Christianity is founded on the resurrection. That's the one most important thing about Christianity.
Not to mention, Muslims also believe that that Jesus was I'm sorry, they believe that Jesus was a prophet, a true prophet who never lied, and Jesus claimed to be the only begotten Son of God. And Muslims don't believe that God has a son. So a lot of hypocrisy and contradictions with Muslims in the Quran.
So yeah, and if Kabat, if you would want to read the book "Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus" by Nabil Qureshi, he talks about his faith growing up as a Muslim and becoming a Christian, and it was because he looked into the evidence and he looked into the lifestyles actually of Muhammad versus Jesus. Found that was pretty convincing.
Yep. So, and again, I'll be more than willing to have a conversation with him if he wants.
Okay, yeah, we're more than willing. And Digital Gnosis, that's Nathan. He says you should look at mine and Camille's response to IP. So we will do that. We'll do that at some point. We'll look at Nathan's and Camille's response.
And I want to say this too. Muslims are a lot more respectful than I think the atheist community as a whole, because at least a Muslim is going to sit back and actually practice some form of decorum, like as far as trying to practice how to behave when you're talking to another person, whereas some of these atheists, or a lot of them, don't know how to have an adult conversation. So I'm looking forward to doing that one day.
Okay, good. So I put the screen up in front of us for this debate that we're going to review today, and let me just make sure I've got the sound on so we can hear that. And you can see right here, Michael at this point had stopped Jim from saying something. So then we kind of get clarity on exactly what both positions are right about here. And so are you ready to start this, G-Man?
Let's do this.
All right. So here we go.
I'm specifically saying Jesus was crucified for insurrection or being king of the Jews. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thieves were crucified. How do we know Jesus wasn't just crucified for, being a thief?
Sure.
I mean, so I'm saying I want to know, what is your reasons for thinking Jesus was crucified for insurrection or being king of the Jews?
Because it doesn't have a lot of explanatory power, because it doesn't make sense that that the authors would portray him as breaking the law of a claim as king of the Jews, instead of something amazing like turning all of Pilate's robes pink. Or something like that, like a big show of power, but instead it's just this claim of people are saying, there's a rumor going around, and the old Jewish people are pissed off about it. So we got to do something about that. Is this true?
Now, G-Man, you and I need to comment on this, because clearly here's why Jesus was crucified. And the Jewish people made it quite clear to Pilate when they told him it was because he said he's the Son of God. That's reported in the book of John. And he also said, according to Mark 14:62, and you will see the Son of Man sitting in the cloud, coming in the clouds of heaven and sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One. That's a direct reference to Daniel 7. Right after he said that, they tore their clothes and they said they needed to crucify him, essentially, because for blasphemy. So no, it wasn't because he said he's the king of the Jews. It was because he basically referred to himself in a way that they recognized completely as God. Right. So it wasn't because he's running around saying, I'm your king, I'm taking the place of Caesar. That wasn't the case.
What is that in John chapter 8 or 9, when Jesus made the claim? He said, before Abraham was, I am. He was actually making a claim not only to be the only begotten Son of God, and I know some people struggle with this, but he also claimed to be God when he said, before Abraham was, I am. And the Jews understood full well what he was saying. That's why they ripped their clothes, and they wanted to kill him at that point. They were picking up rocks looking for him. So again, yeah, Jim Major's information is off.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
off.
So let's keep going here.
Yeah, that seems like it's very, very possible. This is like first of all, there's a high prior for it, a high prior probability. Romans were very, very known for not only executing people who made them look bad or tried to one up them or try to take their throne away, but they would make damn sure that nobody else would do that afterwards and make an example of them. Which is one of the many reasons that I don't believe that Jesus that Pilate would have permitted anybody to take Jesus's body. And there's
Okay,
plenty of
we can stop there. We can stop there. Okay, so for those of you who don't watch a lot of like debates between Christians and atheists, one of the first things that I would recommend, and I know IP's doing it now, but when actually forget what I just said about IP. You need to make the person that's debating you stick to the claim of what's in the Bible. Okay, make them address what the claim is, and then have them stray away from it if they don't believe the claim and they want to go into history saying it doesn't line up or whatever. Which you guys just got finished hearing Jim Major say it's just a bunch of malarkey. All right. Oh, Pilate would have never allowed. The Romans were some of the most brutal, immoral people in history. He's trying to make it sound like, oh, Pontius Pilate was this upright, respectable guy. Like, what book is he reading? That's not how he's portrayed in the Bible. Not only did they before they crucified Jesus, they beat him to a bloody pulp. You know what I mean? They flogged him. They embarrassed him. You know what I mean? Some of them punched him in the face and told him no, as a matter of fact, I believe that's the Jews that did that, where they punched him in. No, it was the Romans. They punched him in the face and they told him to prophesy who would hit him next, right? And then they what else did they put a crown of thorns on his head and they put a purple robe on him and they mocked the Jews saying, this is the king of the Jews. And we also know, because of the claims of scripture, that he got an illegal trial. You know what I mean? And there was putting charges on him that should have never been put on him. Like one of them was, for example, is that he said that he would destroy the temple. He wasn't talking about the building, he was talking about his body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and Jim Majors is talking a bunch of malarkey right now. And I mean a lot. And you're gonna see it in IP's face throughout the rest of this. He's just gonna be like, oh God, where is this guy getting this stuff from?
Yeah, well, that's the, and I agree exactly with what you're saying right here, and it's very important that you take note. He's using I mean, we have all kinds of evidence that says that Pilate allowed him to be buried in the tomb. We've got multiple sources indicating that. And so what Jim is doing is he's essentially creating a new narrative that nobody ever said in ancient times. Nobody said that Pilate didn't allow Joseph of Arimathea to take down Jesus' body and bury him in an empty tomb. Pilate actually, let's point out something about Pilate. Pilate did not want to crucify Jesus. Okay, that was not his first thing. He actually tried to do whatever he could do to not crucify Jesus. When Jesus was brought before him, his wife had a dream, and she said, "Don't have anything to do with that man. I have been."
Right.
He basically was in her dream, and she realized that there's something going on. And so Pilate basically said, "I'm not going to, I don't want to do this." So he brought Jesus out there, and he got in front of the Jewish people, and he said, "I'll give you back. We'll trade. How about Barabbas instead?" And so, or I'll give you Jesus back. And they said they wanted Barabbas back because they wanted to crucify Jesus. And the high priest said that they wanted to crucify Jesus because they felt that one man should be dead to preserve the Jewish faith. They thought that they should just kill the one man. And so Pilate then he sent Jesus to be in front of Herod. Okay, because he figured that Jesus wasn't in his jurisdiction. He did not want to crucify Jesus. Then Herod returned Jesus back to him, and Pilate realized, okay, so he went out there again and he said, "I am washing my hands of this." He did not want to do it. And so Pilate had some mercy on Jesus. The other thing is Pilate wrote down on his cross, "King of the Jews" in 3 different languages. Okay, and then the Jewish people said, "No, write down, he said he's the King of the Jews." And Pilate's like, "No, I leave it like I put it." And that's because Pilate realized there's something about Jesus very special. Jesus said he's not of this world. Pilate probably realized that. And it's my understanding that his wife converted to Christianity.
Right. And something else I want to say about this, somebody in the live chat, SJ, said that that Jim Majors is actually considering all of history. And I don't know like what I'm talking about regarding this, but I want to primarily focus on the Jim Majors comment about him taking all of history into account. What history
Yeah.
are we talking about?
Yeah,
Like, what history are we talking about? You can't just make a blanket statement like that. And that's going to be a theme throughout what we're going to see here. A lot of blanket statements being made without being backed by any facts by Jim Majors and
see,
the people that support him.
I feel like what Jim's doing here is he's putting out a lot of he's basically creating a lot of ideas
Right.
that have no ancient support, that he's just making
Exactly.
up to try to get away from the fact that Jesus was put in the tomb. And it's kind of
Right.
a crazy, it's kind of crazy. So so let's go back here. Let's turn it
You
up.
can actually read it in the Gospel of Matthew and in the other Gospels too about what actually happened. So, and we can go to our secular sources and see what the secular people said about Jesus and Pilate and all these other people, and you'll see there's no basis for what Jim's saying. There's a lot of basis for what we're saying, though.
Yeah, I want to point out secular sources indicate that, like we talked to Josephus. Josephus
Right.
talked a lot about the burial practices for Jewish people. They had to take the body down before the Passover. It was a major celebration. They can't have the bodies hanging up there. That's consistent with their own laws. Okay, it's in the
Right.
Torah that they're supposed to take the body down. Okay, so
Right.
so it's and he says that, and others also backs that. So let's go to these guys.
Textual evidence backing up that the Romans and the Jews didn't see eye to eye as far as to the imperative nature of getting somebody in the dirt before the sun went down.
Well, yeah, the Romans didn't. It wasn't their law; it was a Jewish law. But of course, the Romans permitted the Jews to obey their laws. Okay, they didn't want to cause an insurrection among the Jews. They wanted the Jewish people to be happy, and leaving a body outside would not make the Jewish people happy. They felt that the body needed to be properly, buried. And so, okay, and even Josephus talks about the fact that even malefactors, people who had committed crimes, were also given these burials. Okay, Josephus pointed that out. That's outside of the Bible. So here we go.
Okay, so what are the sources that say Pilate would not have allowed a burial?
Well, not just Pilate, but Roman rules, and it doesn't say that they wouldn't, but that they didn't have to if they didn't want to. It says that
Right.
they permitted people to take it, and I'll also add that it says they
Speculation.
permitted family members.
This is all speculation. Actually, this speaks to one of the things that Jim is actually making a case for Christianity is by pointing out some of the embarrassing facts surrounding Jesus's resurrection and crucifixion. One of the most embarrassing things is that rather than have his own family come and take him off the cross, okay, he's got a Sanhedrin member of all people come and take him off the cross. And so Joseph of Arimathea took him off the cross. That is embarrassing. I mean, certainly everybody would say, well, Mary was at the foot of the cross. She was around. Why didn't she take him off the cross? Or why didn't John? John was around. Why didn't he do it? Why didn't Peter do it? Peter's supposed to be his rock. Rather, we've got this embarrassing little piece of information that Joseph of Arimathea, that's not something anyone who wrote the gospel is going to make up. It would be ridiculous to make up something like that.
Exactly. Said it very well.
Yeah. So, okay. All right.
To take it. So in this case, it does seem very strange that a member of the council that begged Pilate so hard to crucify this guy, they voted was one of the voters voted yes, killed.
Okay. One of the things that I want to
Not
point out-
everybody who was part of the Sanhedrin was necessarily against Jesus. You remember in John chapter 3 where Nicodemus actually comes to
Yeah.
Jesus at night. You know what I mean? And he came and he wanted to know that he said to him that we know that what you do comes from God, and they had that famous conversation and everything. But not everybody in that council was against him. Go ahead, Asha.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you have a public vote on something, okay, you're pressured a lot of times to vote. That's why when people vote to form a union, if in the United States, for example, you have to have a majority, but it's a secret vote. That's why when we vote for our president, it's a secret vote. People don't want to be pressured by outside people. Now, the Sanhedrin had a public vote, and so probably if Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea were there, if they were present at the time, they probably just went along with it to agree because they were forced to in a way. So
Exactly.
obviously, we see how they really felt about Jesus. We see it with Joseph of Arimathea giving him a proper burial in his own tomb. And that was, of course, prophesied by Isaiah that he'd be buried in a rich man's tomb.
Exactly.
So, okay, here we go.
Jesus would then go to Pilate and say, "Hey, you remember that dude I sent to you? Can I get him back? Like, I need to do some stuff."
Yeah, burial.
Just-
And we have other sources like Josephus and Philo that say that they were allowed to keep their laws or bury people. I don't see why Pilate would not allow this. And if we want to talk about the character of Pilate and Joseph,
then portrayed as why is Joseph of Arimathea then portrayed as being nervous and frightened before he asked Pilate for the body?
This is like a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer. You answer that, G-Man.
Okay, because obviously speaking up for Jesus would result in direct persecution on him. They would probably kill him for doing that. If you don't believe me, go read the first couple of chapters of Acts and see how the Jewish leaders treated the apostles when they started preaching the gospel. Give me a break. Anyway, go ahead, SJ.
You're right. Exactly. Spot on there, G-Man. Spot on. I mean, that's obvious. They were afraid of them. A lot of people were afraid of them. Even, like, for example, when Jesus cured the blind guy, okay, they brought the blind guy in front of him. He said, yes, Jesus cured me. And then they brought his parents in front of him, and his parents were afraid of them. And his parents said, well, let him testify. Let our son testify. Rather, they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to lose their privileges in the temple. And we even have, when Jesus brought back to life Zechariah, Mary and Martha's brother, Zechariah, right? They brought him back to, am I saying the right name? They brought him back to life, and then the Jewish people decided that they wanted to kill him too because he was brought back to life, and that was convincing a lot of Jewish people to convert to Christianity.
Talking about Lazarus? You talking about Lazarus?
Oh, Lazarus. Lazarus is
Lazarus.
I knew
Okay.
I was off on the name. Yeah, Lazarus.
Gotcha.
So we brought Lazarus back to life, so we had that. So
Yeah.
okay, so here we go.
Well, apart from describing motives of someone, he could very well have been nervous about other Sanhedrin knowing about it. He could have been nervous about other reasons related to that. I mean, it just says he was nervous. It doesn't tell us why, though. But what you know, the sources do agree that.
Let me say this here real quick. I feel for IP because you have the facts of what the Bible actually says about the story, right? Obviously, Jim Majors don't agree with the story. So he's listening to this, and it's got to be like, that's not what the Bible says. You understand what I mean? Obviously, I mean, everybody who's actually read the Gospels know that by that particular time, the religious leaders were very corrupt. You know what I mean? And if you went against them and you tried to take away their place of power, then you was going to be eliminated. So, of course, these people are going to be nervous to speak out against the religious leaders of the day. What Jesus accomplished in his day and what the apostles did, wasn't done since the prophets, when people openly spoke out against them. You know what I mean? John the Baptist did it. You know what I mean? The greatest of the prophets. So I can imagine what poor IP was going through his head when he was listening to this.
Well, one of the things, G-Man, that I think about with the Bible is a lot of people say, well, you can't use the Bible. You can't prove this with the Bible. You can't use it at all. I'm like, well, wait a second. Let's look at this. We have independent sources in the Bible. We've got multiple independent sources, eyewitness accounts who were there at the time. We've got people living out their life in fear, basically, not really fearing, but realizing that they're going to be preaching for Jesus for decades, despite any sort of protections from government and protections from any sort of church leaders, because the synagogue leaders are against them. So they were still doing this. And so, I mean, and the other thing is the Bible, as I said, multiple independent eyewitness accounts. Now, or they were friends of eyewitnesses, like Luke and Mark were friends of eyewitnesses. The reason I'm pointing this out is because these have been compiled. The church fathers felt these are the best accounts of Jesus, and they were the earliest accounts of Jesus. The later Gnostic things came about, and they became really mythical and strange. But the stuff is early, and the church fathers went to great lengths to ensure that everything was reliable and valid and all that kind of good stuff. And so the assumption that we have to find something out of the Bible is basically just saying that a first century person who wrote something and disagreed with Christianity is given more legitimacy than people who actually heard about the good news and started believing. So those Christian sources are very good, and there's no reason to discount them purely because they became Christian, which is the honest response to what happened with Jesus.
Exactly. So let's get back to Mr. Majors, or
Yes.
IP rather.
Okay, yeah.
That he buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. I see no reason to deny that from presuppositions. I mean, if we're just going to make up stories that we have no sources for, let's just say Jesus was crucified for thievery. When he threw out the money changers in the temple, he also took out a bunch of sacred artifacts from the temple. The Sanhedrin was very upset about that. They had him crucified. That's why he was crucified between two thieves. And, just because he was crucified for thievery, well, they would have allowed a burial. I mean, if we're just going to make up things for which we have no sources for, why not that?
But if that was the case, then why the presence of the sign that says Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews?
Well, that was clearly, as you said, there was embellishments. That was the gospel authors couldn't handle the fact that Jesus was killed for just thievery. They had to make up some bigger claim.
Yeah, I do think that some of that, like some of the attempt to make Jesus seem like this crucified king, like the purple robe, casting lots, dividing his garments, the crown of thorns, all these things. I think those are all literary interpolations and embellishments.
Yeah.
It was meant as a form of mockery. That's why they did it.
Oh yeah.
You understand? And Jesus came from the line of David too. I don't know if a lot of atheists know this or not, but he was but he was, part of the. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, he was supposed to sit on the throne of David, and he's going to do that when he actually returns. But he was of the tribe of Judah, and he was supposed to be the king at that particular point. You know what I mean? And most of you probably remember when Jesus made his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. You know what I mean? And it was like, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna.
Yeah.
And, and then Israel rejected him.
Yeah. And actually, I want to build off what you're just saying there, because that, in case you aren't familiar with when Jesus did this, he did this on Monday of the Passion Week. That was the day that the Jewish people selected the lamb that they were going to slaughter and sacrifice on the Passover. And so on Monday, Jesus presented himself as the Passover lamb when he marched into on a donkey into Jerusalem, and he was hailed as the king. He presented himself, and he finally came out fully to show everybody that yes, he is the Son of God. And he, actually, speaking of this, here's what happened. Okay, here's what happened. This is no literary embellishment. Here's see if you can know where I'm reading from. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts the Lord. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Where do you think that came from?
Came from the Gospels.
It sure sounds like it, doesn't it? But it actually came from Psalm 22. Okay. This predicted exactly what was going to happen to Jesus. They mocked.
As a matter of fact. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, say that again. You kind of cut out there a little bit.
Okay. Did the Romans say that? Or was that the Pharisees, or was that a prophecy?
This is a prophecy from Psalm 22, written 1,000 years before Jesus. So awesome. And even we have this part, many bulls surround me, strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. The bulls of Bashan, those are the Pharisees. And that's the direct reference to the Pharisees. We knew what they were going to do. It says right here, it says in Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, and Zechariah 12:10, he was going to be pierced. And that's for our transgressions, according to Isaiah 53. We have a lot of prophecies. I know IP doesn't really like prophecies. I love prophecies. I'm super pumped about prophecies being fulfilled.
Yeah, IP likes to deal with the church fathers a lot.
Yeah. Okay, should I go back to them?
Yeah, let's go back.
And I think we've got the moderator here, the Gospel of Truth. I actually don't know his name. I didn't catch his name. Did you catch it by chance?
No, I was paying attention to what was coming out of the mouth of is the moderator in the live chat?
No, he's not in the live. I don't think he is. But I see he's here right now on the screen. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
I would love to go on his channel and have a debate with somebody, but it's going to have to be something worth preparing for, though. In case anyone
wants to know about a G-Man upcoming debate, if you caught it, I've already organized it on my channel. G-Man is going to be debating next Sunday, your friendly neighborhood atheist. Ethan is his first name, and they're going to debate on, does God exist? So this should be very interesting. So yeah, it'll be he good. Might have to bring arguments that God does not exist. I don't know how you can argue for that, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, he's probably going to claim he has a default position and all the burden is on me to prove it. I'm pretty sure that's what based on our last conversation, that's what he might do. But there's other ways he can go about doing it too. So we'll see. Yeah. Okay. So here we go.
Embellishments. But I think Jesus was flawed. I think he was tortured. I think that he was crucified.
Oh, wait, you don't hear anything?
I hear it now.
Okay, here we go.
I see no reason why they would lie and say that Jesus was being convicted of being of the claim of being king of the Jews when in fact he stole something from the temple. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, I'm just pointing out, are we going to make up theories for which we have no evidence for? I mean, let's do it with Hannibal. I don't think Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants. That seems unreasonable. The Carthaginians were masters at the sea, clearly from the First Punic War. Therefore, he probably sailed along the European coast and landed in Europe. That makes more sense. I'm just going to make up something for which we have no textual evidence for. Why would we do that when there's no reason to deny the fact that we have multiple attestation for the tomb?
Well, I mean, let's think about that though. Like, let's genuinely think about what motive could somebody have? Like, what could somebody get out of doing that? I mean, for what reason would they have to do it? I mean, because I can for everything that I think is historical, I can give you a reason for it, and either it's obviously something that they took from the Old Testament, or it's not a.
Yeah, one of the things that frustrates me from watching Jim Major's debates, no matter who he's debating, somebody needs to tell him speculation doesn't count as proof, or what is possible is not proof. He has to have some type of historical event or something to be able to say, look, we have these stories, we have this. We know this about Roman history. We know this about Jesus of Nazareth. He has nothing.
No, he doesn't. It is all speculation. That's what I was noticing about this whole debate. It's speculating. Well, what if this was the case, or what if that is the case? Well, anyone can speculate. I could speculate that, what if 5-foot guy is going to walk down the road. I mean, you can make up all kinds of speculations, but he has no backing. If you're going to do a speculation, you need to at least have some sort of backing, some ancient sources that back your assertions, because we do have ancient sources that back our part of the story, the empty tomb.
Right.
He has no sources to back this mass grave or whatever he's trying to posit here.
He can look. I mean, and you're right. Even if he uses speculation, he can look at the law of Moses, and say, "Oh, it's totally impossible." When Jesus was murdered, look at the law. He could have been put in a mass grave. He doesn't do that. And by the way, you can't do that. By the way, but at least he would sound better than what he's sounding now. He could say that according to Jewish tradition, on the Passover, Jesus could not have possibly be put into a tomb. It would have to be something totally different or whatever. The Bible talks about how his body was anointed with oil. It talks about how a rich man was the one that provided the tomb. It talks about all of these things, and all he's doing is speculating his own personal thoughts in his imagination. That does not count as evidence, and that is why IP wiped the floor with him in this debate.
Yeah. Speculations, that doesn't work for, I mean, that's one thing that IP does that I think is really good on all of his debates is he does a ton of research. Like he'll actually listen to a bunch of the videos that I'm sure he listened to a bunch of Jim Major's debates and videos before. And because he's done that in his other debates. He's like, oh, well, in this other debate, you said this, his other debates that he's really cleanly won, I would say, would be something like the one against Godless Engineer. Actually, that would be a fun one to review too.
We can do that.
Godless Engineer is a Jesus mythicist. I mean, that one's just beautiful. We got to review that.
We can do that next time, maybe.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay.
But this was a very frustrating debate.
He and Camille apparently must have also reviewed this same debate, I guess. So he put a link in the channel for his review, his and Camille's review. And Camille is an atheist. I wanted to talk to Camille at one point because I think I'd like to have a conversation with Mr. Camille. So that's what I'd like to do. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Any part of creed or an early oral tradition. I'm
not a big advocate of arguing from prophecy because I agree they were vague on purpose. I mean, 1 Corinthians said, if the archons, the rulers of the world, had not known, they would not have crucified the Lord. I mean, the prophecies were vague on purpose. It's supposed to be this big mystery until it was finally revealed. Stop
it.
Yeah.
Love IP, but you're wrong, IP. Look at the one passage that SJ used earlier when she was reading out of Psalms, and then look at the fulfillment of the prophecy. It doesn't matter how vague it is. You see the fulfillment of this happening, 1,000 years later, right? Mm-hmm. So you can use it. It may not be the strongest evidence in the whole world for a person that's not saved or whatever, but it counts as evidence. And he has to be able to disprove it. The burden is going to be on him for him to say, well, I know it said that 1,000 years ago, but that could have been, you know what I mean? The burden would be on him to do that. So no, prophecy is a good way of convincing people
Prophecy is a good way. The other thing that we can, that I haven't talked about so much, but I've been thinking a lot about it, is a lot of times we see situations in the Old Testament repeated in the New Testament. For example, a lot of times there's references to the 40-day period or 40 years. 40 is a very special number. You've gotten Jonah, 3 days and 3 nights. Jonah goes into the whale, which is kind of like what Jesus did. He goes into the underworld. It's kind of metaphorical that it relates to Jesus is going into the underworld. You've got Moses in Exodus. This whole idea with the Passover lamb, Jesus was the Passover lamb who gave himself as the sacrifice. And you have Moses going 40 years wandering around the wilderness. Well, Jesus went for 40 days into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan. The wilderness is symbolic of sort of the underworld in a way. It's sort of like a satanic, that's where the bad things occur. And so we have there's just lots of cool references.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, keep going.
Yeah, the Old Testament law basically points to Jesus. Yeah, the Old Testament law points to Jesus. Matter of fact, everything that we see in the Old Testament eventually points to Jesus and what he was going to do on the cross and what he's going to ultimately do in the future when he returns.
You're right. It does. It definitely points to Jesus. And so, in fact, Jesus also, as the angel of the Lord, in several cases, Jesus was making appearances in the Old Testament. And so Mike Winger's got some really good stuff on that, but I've done videos and blogs on that too. So we have evidence of that. And so that's when people say, well, you've never seen the Lord. No, none of us have seen God the Father. However, we have seen God the Son. People have seen God the Son, the manifestation of God the Father.
And by the way, SJ, that would be a bad argument on their part, saying that we would have to see him in order to believe it. No one in our modern day has ever seen William Shakespeare, but we know that he existed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a bad argument. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back.
Get a lot of passages.
I mean, it's not that vague. It's not that vague. In Isaiah 7, God tells King Ahaz that God is going to send him somebody who's going to help him with this little sand going on, being stuck between the north and the south. They're wanting him to join their side, getting pulled back and forth and getting threatened. Well, I'll kill you if you join his side. And right, send the baby by the time that he's of age. Everything will be fine. But that's supposedly about Jesus. That's made to be about Jesus. It is not so vague that it doesn't have a timestamp.
All right, guys, we're going to conclude this portion of the debate. Thank you for a great discussion. Now we're going to transition to our closing statements. We got 5-minute closing. So, Mike Jones, you're up.
Stop it.
Okay.
Yeah,
before they go into this.
Okay.
I would like to compliment the moderator for his patience, and I know he had to say that because he wanted to be respectful to both people. SJ, in the nicest way possible, do you believe that this was a nice conversation that they had, or it might have been respectful, but I don't know about a nice one or whatever?
I think well, it's just that when we hear points that go so much against what we believe, and it's not just, and it's, I mean, I think they both kept it as respectful and as nice, and they both actually at the end, they all complimented each other on how they liked each other and they were keeping it respectful, but it didn't seem like an enjoyable conversation. I wouldn't call it that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's a good way to put it, but let's hear their closing statements.
I just want to, since Jim actually referenced Isaiah 7, I want to reference this Isaiah 7. It says, Isaiah 7:14 is a verse that everyone would be concerned with. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us, okay? And that's Jesus. And so he will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. And so they, so again, a prophecy of Jesus, and the prophecy that he was born of a virgin or a maiden. A lot of times there's another translation that says young maiden for that.
Let me say something real quick about something that was in the live chat. Somebody said, and I've been listening to this for years, they said that the Bible is a claim and is not the evidence, and you can't use the Bible to prove the Bible, right? So if you had a debate with an atheist, for example, and they said that Jesus wasn't the Messiah, you're telling me I can't look at the prophecies that were made thousands of years before he was actually born to show you that he has to be the Messiah? It's a ridiculous statement that they're making there. Yes, the Bible makes a lot of claims, but you can use the Bible to show why those claims are actually true if you know anything about history.
Yeah, and I think the importance of trying to make the Bible a circular claim. You can make a circular claim if you're talking about a single book, okay, taking one book and referencing that one book. But the Bible is a compilation of 66 books written by 40 authors over 1,500 years in 3 continents and 3 languages. If you try to tell me it's circular because I reference one of the books in this bigger text, that's pretty ridiculous, okay? So it's just, it's not like, and I know we have a Muslim in the chat. I don't know if he's still here, but it's not like the Quran. The Quran was written by one man in one generation in a certain period of time. And if you use the Quran to reference the Quran, yes, that would be circular.
Exactly. And let's listen to these final statements. This should be good.
Yeah, it is good. This is where they sum it all up.
Point. Open wrote an article, did the New Testament misquote the Old Testament? And Isaiah 7 is about something that happened relevant in the Old Testament. It's not necessarily about Jesus. Yes. This is about Jesus reenacting the Old Testament. They reapplied prophecies to Jesus on purpose. This was part of the cultural context. Again, I don't put that much emphasis on prophecy.
That's where we differ. I do put a lot of emphasis on prophecies. And here's one reason why. Jesus put references on prophecies. He actually pulled out the book of Isaiah and read a passage that was about himself to the church leaders. Okay, Jesus was referencing that. We also have Matthew. In Matthew, my gosh, it's just littered with all the references back to the Old Testament. It's probably the gospel that points to the prophecies the most. And then we have the eunuch going down in Ethiopia and referencing Isaiah 53 and saying, who does this describe? Okay. In the New Testament, we have plenty of references to the Old Testament as prophecies and how it was foretold. And so including from Jesus himself. So I don't think that's a one place I disagree with IP on.
I would disagree. I would disagree with him as well on the same topic. But let's continue.
Okay.
Never part of my original argument. And that's not even, I don't even bring up prophecy in my older resurrection series. So yeah, that's not really my main argument here. Hold on, let me finish my opening statement. You can respond then.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have tons of evidence to suggest that Jesus was actually buried in the tomb. Again, recap. The Digesta says those that condemn to death could be buried if it was requested and granted. Secondary evidence. Quintillan's secondary evidence saying attributed to Quintillan says someone on a cross could be buried if they were pierced. Philo says crucified people were buried in Egypt because the governor allowed it. Josephus says a Jew is buried crucified victim. Archaeological evidence in 2 sources, 2 examples, Johanan and Antigonus, the last Hasmonean king, were crucified and they were allowed to be buried. Jewish sources express the importance of burying bodies. Philo and Josephus record Rome did allow to keep their sacred customs and rituals. And in fact, Philo notes Tiberius scolded Pilate on this, allowing them to keep their laws. Tomb of Jesus is multiply attested. It's consistent with standard Jewish burial practices, and there's no competing traditions here. It's clearly stacked in that favor. And again, I would refer people to eyewitness testimonies, like the sources I mentioned earlier. Just because there are differences in the way the accounts are given, that doesn't mean they're false or they're wrong on the general points. In fact,
actually, the fact that there are differences between the accounts lends credence to their reliability. You've got, remember J. Warner Wallace? Have you ever heard of him?
J. Warner Wallace, no.
He was a forensic detective and he was an atheist for many years, and he decided to look at the evidence for Christianity. And so he started looking at the Bibles, and the fact that the Gospels are slightly different from each other, especially the synoptics versus John, the fact that they're different and are 4 different things, he actually said that gives strength to Christianity, because he thought it was always really suspicious when he was talking to people, interviewing eyewitnesses for murders or something like that. If they had the exact same story, he figured they got together and fabricated it. But when they were a bit different, that actually made it seem like it's more truthful.
William Lane Craig describes that very well too, and is probably the best way to answer any question regarding the contradictions, the so-called contradictions, anyway, in the resurrection accounts.
Yeah,
resurrection and tomb accounts.
Any provable contradictions? Okay,
there are none.
Yet to find that.
I've
been looking. Yeah, I've been looking. It's like there's people make assumptions. Even I made an assumption. I just realized, it just struck me a couple days ago that Jesus made an independent appearance to Peter. Okay, that's reported in Luke, and it's also reported in 1 Corinthians 15. Now, I didn't realize that Jesus, for some reason, I was thinking when he appeared to Peter, it was when he was with the 12, but he actually appeared prior to that to Peter, and then he appeared to the 12. And so, so he made multiple appearances to multiple people over that 40-day period.
Yep, and we got over 500 eyewitnesses that said they saw Jesus when he rose from the dead. So again, I would love to hear Jim H's evidence and his proof, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be listening to speculation and coulda, shoulda, woulda. We're not going to hear any proof though.
Yeah, and I think IP made a really strong case here. I like all the ancient sources that he brought up. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so here we go.
It's consistent with what we would expect on eyewitness testimony being handed down to the authors like Mark and Luke, for example. There's no reason to deny this. If you want a pretty good example, just a popular example, go to Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries, Episode 2. They mention the fact that there were two witnesses to an event. First witness saw a blue Chevy Illumina outside of the hair salon and a woman with shoulder-length hair. The second witness saw a blue Ford Taurus or a Malibu and a man with shoulder-length hair. Now, Michael Posley, the special agent of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation on the case, says, and I quote, "These witnesses are credible because they essentially saw the same thing and are totally independent of her." So he says witnesses regarding an event are credible even though they have contradictions in their account. Experts on eyewitness testimony don't say eyewitness testimony is unreliable just because they vary on minor details. That's what we would expect. That's what we see in every eyewitness
and that's very important. That's very important because what atheists will try to say is eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of evidence out there. That's because they're being intellectually dishonest about the kind of eyewitness testimony that they're talking about. If you have two people that have the same stories and saying the exact same things, as IP just got finished saying with the detective from Unsolved Mysteries, and I was a very, very proud of you, IP, for that one, man, because that was very good. That's something that you're supposed to be suspicious of. Go read the Gospels. You're going to hear this story, that story, this story, that story, this story, that story, and nobody's got the same 100% story. Nobody. You understand what I'm saying? So if you present that to the police, and you already talked about this, SJ, IP is briefly talking about it now. If you present that to the police are going to be like, no, these are credible eyewitness accounts. They do count as evidence as people seeing Jesus actually rise from the dead. You know what I mean? Because just because they're not seeing the exact same story doesn't mean it's not credible. The atheists got it backwards. What they need to say is if somebody's got the exact same story, that is suspicious. That you should probably not listen to. But if you got people with contradictory claims that are all basically saying the same things, their arguments actually should be taken seriously. That's why I'm telling you, when you're debating atheists, you got to be smart. You got to be on your feet. You got to catch them when they're twisting things.
Yeah, I want to say, even if you really need to do, people need to do their due diligence if they think there is a contradiction. And I just wrote a blog because I found this, people were trying to say that John and the synoptics were contradictory as far as which day is the day of preparation. However, one of the, three of them were using one form of time reckoning and the other one was using another form. So either they're using the Judean form of time reckoning or the Galilean form of time reckoning. And what that means is one of those is sunrise to sunrise as far as a day. The other one, sunset to sunset, is a day. Okay, so when you have two different forms of reckoning, the day of preparation to them would fall at different times. And so when you report that kind of stuff, people think, oh my gosh, I caught something. Whoa. And the other thing that the Jewish people did in ancient times that somebody, Bart Ehrman and other people have thought that this is a contradiction, is because they didn't have clocks. So they didn't have, this real sensitivity to what time it was. They bunched up time by quadrants. And so they had the daytime, which was 12 hours, which had 4 quadrants of 3-hour time slots. So like if you're talking about noon, it could be anywhere between noon and 3, that's the noon hour. Okay. And so that sort of thing is out there. And so we have, and the same thing with the night, they've got the night, they have them quadrants in watches. Okay. And so the rooster crows between 12 and 3 a.m. So if you actually look at those and you plot that all out, the way that they think of things, and you put down exactly what happened to Jesus when he was tried and when he was crucified and going up against Pontius Pilate, you'll see that it fits in there like a glove. The rooster crows when Peter denies him, happens to be between 12 and 3 probably, and you can keep going on. And it's really cool that when you put that all together, it works, it fits just beautifully. And so there is no contradiction. I haven't found any.
Exactly. And it goes back to research and reading and doing your due diligence. That's what it goes back to at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, here we go.
As I note in the book, From Memory to History, it just is what we get constantly with regards to eyewitness testimony. I don't see that as any evidence Jesus wasn't buried. We have plenty of evidence that Jesus was buried in a tomb. And once again, the Gospels are not guilty until proven innocent. Jim accepts that Jesus was most likely baptized by John the Baptist, even though those accounts have differences. He accepts Jesus was crucified for being king of the Jews, even though those accounts have differences. Why not the burial? This is not something miraculous. This is just Jesus was buried in a tomb. There's no reason for the Christians to invent it. They could have had Jesus thrown into a mass grave, and they could have named the field and then said, and all the bodies rose up with Jesus, just like when he died.
That's also a really good point, too. But the reason why Jim Majors cares about this topic is because we know that if you want to disprove Christianity, you have to disprove the resurrection. Because if there's no resurrection, then we believe in vain. That's why it's important for him to prove that Jesus was in a mass burial. But even if that was the case, they would have just wrote that down and still made the claim that he rose from the dead. Like IP's doing a really good job making his closing statement here. A very good job.
He is. And again, just like IP has pointed out, we don't have any ancient sources to the contrary. In fact, the ancient sources who were the enemies of Jesus were making up the story that the disciples hid the body. Okay. That's what they believe. The disciples hid the body. So that's there. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So yeah, he's making some good arguments here. Now, what Jim's going to do, one of Jim's major arguments on the empty tomb is to say, well, which tomb? Where is it? All right. So I think he's going to probably do that. They have a couple of contenders for which tomb it is over there. And one of the arguments against this idea is that Jerusalem was completely annihilated in the year 70. Okay. The Jewish people were, it's called the Jewish Diaspora. It's spread out all over the world. They left. And so thinking that the people were constantly preserving these different areas when many of them were being martyred, even included in Jesus' family. So we've got references from Jesus' family in the second century, right around the middle of the century. They were also martyred, the relatives of his. So we have that kind of thing going on. So a lot of these people were gone. So we don't know exactly where the tomb was. Again, Jerusalem had been destroyed. And so, okay. So should we go back to the video?
Exactly.
Okay, here we go. Tombs are empty. There's no reason for them to invent the tomb there. It's just part of the history, as Dale Allison notes. It's an historical memory handed down. So again, why are the Gospels always questioned more than other historical sources? I've never understood this. If you want more, I recommend reading Resurrecting Jesus by Dale Allison. I don't agree with everything he says, but he gives a lot of good arguments for the burial of Jesus. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I think the evidence is clearly stacked to indicate Jesus was buried. Again, this is a non-miraculous account. I don't see why this has to be up for such high debate. I will say I think Jim is a very intelligent person. He didn't bring up any of the dumb arguments like, oh, well, Arimathea is called best disciple town, which I'm sure he would agree with me is not a good argument. But I mean, you know, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad we had it, and I'll concede the rest of my time.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you. All right, Jim, you're up for your 5-minute closing, man.
Thanks so much. Mike, just going to say the feelings mutual, completely reciprocal. Why the tomb? Why would they just make it up? Because it serves a purpose. Everything that they make up, everything that is embellished upon, it's embellished for a reason, either to make it more convincing or to introduce a new character or event.
Yeah, again, a lot of this stuff, let's be real here, and let's remember something that's really important. The gospel authors were they were under no charge to make things up and to embellish, because if they were going to make things up, they certainly wouldn't have made up the fact that Jesus was crucified in the first place. Crucifixion was the most demeaning form of punishment. They wouldn't have made up that Jesus' family tried to stop his ministry. They wouldn't have made up that the females were the first to discover the empty tomb, because females had no sorts of credibility, according to people like Josephus, and their testimony was not considered valid. They wouldn't have made up a number of different things. Like, why would they have picked Joseph Arimathea to bury Jesus rather than saying, okay, his family came out, or Peter, the hero, came out and buried Jesus? So this is silly to think that that any of this stuff is an embellishment. It's an embellishment in the wrong way if it were. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I totally agree with you, and I'm not even going to try to add anything to that because I won't stop talking. So let's go back to this closing statement.
I see a question behind Jim, and I don't remember what was with that question. When did Mary learn Jesus has risen? We know that Mary and Jesus's brothers in the book of Acts were all with the apostles worshiping Jesus, and so that's pretty amazing. So
That ain't got nothing to do with whether or not he was buried or not. I know that.
You think that might be one of those what they call red herrings?
Yeah, basically.
Throw the stinky fish out there and get the dogs off our trail.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. Here you go.
That they can use as a segue into something else that they have. But it's not miraculous like just the tomb, but we're not talking. But when we're talking about the inconsistencies about the tomb, miraculous. If you think about it, the angels descending. How many angels are there? Is there one boy? Is there one angel? Is there two angels? Is there two men? And why?
You want to comment on this?
Oh God, this is okay. I gotta be respectful. I'm on your channel, and I might actually talk about this on my channel a little bit. It doesn't matter how many angels are in existence. The Bible tells us. I believe the Bible tells us there was one or two angels that was in the tomb, and that was there to tell them that Jesus' body isn't there no more. Okay.
Yeah.
That's point number one. Point number two. Oh God, what's a respectful way to say this? That is the. Oh God, you know what? Go ahead, SJ. Because I have to be nice. I'm on your channel. I want to call them all kinds of dumb, but anyway, go ahead, SJ.
Well, see, one of the things that atheists try to do is they try to say there's inconsistencies in like what Jim's doing. But let's face something here, okay? It never says only one angel, okay? It says one author might mention one angel, and another author actually mentioned there's two angels. Where clearly there must have been two angels there, but one of them only made mention of one. Okay, it never says only, and that's just like people say, well, what were Jesus's last words? It never says these are Jesus's final words. He had a bunch of final last words. There was it was a number of different things he said. It is finished, and I'm thirsty, and those sorts of things. And so they try to pretend like that's something. So you guys have to look for the words only if you're trying to find a contradiction, okay? Or final words. These are the final words, and the final like 5 words. Specify how many words. It couldn't be final words. Could be the words spoken over the last hour.
He's also mixing the resurrection with whether or not Jesus was buried in the tomb or not. He said that it was miraculous. There's nothing miraculous about laying somebody down to rest. We do this every day. As a matter of fact, I believe it happens 200 or 300 times a minute here in America or whatever. You know what I mean? So what the heck is he talking about? He's conflating the resurrection with him being buried. If he has evidence that Jesus Christ wasn't buried and that he was thrown in a mass grave, he should provide that evidence. And he's been talking, I think, for about a minute now, and he hasn't provided nothing. He's just speculating. And we all know that when you're in a debate and you're not providing any evidence, you lost. So let's hear what he's got to say.
Yeah, you're right. He's basically trying to dig another rabbit hole rather than discuss the actual debate topic itself. So
he's digging a ditch.
Why the change? Of course, you might say, well, just because they say that there was only one doesn't mean that there wasn't another one. Well, sure.
He just added something. They said there's only one. It never says. You guys go back and look at the Bible yourself. It never says only one. Okay, Jim is making this up. He
used to be a pastor. You said, right? This is a former pastor. Oh Lord. Okay. All right.
I don't know if he's a pastor. He's studying. I know he's studying. Actually, right now, he says he's working on a PhD in some sort of religious field. So the atheists are invading the schools into the religious fields. That's a concern. Okay. Here we go.
Okay. But if they say that there's one seated inside the tomb, the next one says that they ascend from heaven, roll back the stone, and sit on top of the stone outside of the tomb. A
lot of things that atheists do too are they try to freeze people in time. Like, is it possible they ascended from heaven, rolled back the stone, went inside, came out, went inside, came out? The empty tomb was being visited over a period of a number of hours on Sunday morning. Okay, so it's certainly possible that people were all over the place. They were inside the tomb, they were outside the tomb. Jim is trying to freeze these people in place. The same thing happened during Jesus' resurrection, a crucifixion. I mean, the way that people look at this, like Bart Ehrman, is very wooden. They're like, okay, like you had to stand right in front of the cross, right in front of Jesus the entire time, versus what was more realistic is people are moving around and circulating and that sort of thing.
Yeah, at this point, they're just trying to find a hole anywhere in the Bible. I know that there's this one guy on YouTube. I forget his YouTube channel name. I'll get it to you a little bit later, SJ. But he literally got on YouTube, and this is back when I believe that if you provided evidence that atheists would believe that God exists. I forget his name, and he made a video saying that if you could find one flaw or one contradiction in the Bible, you can disprove the entire Bible. They literally believe this. That's why they're trying to find anything that is contradictory or something in the Bible that is inconsistent so that they can go back and say, you see, it's not reliable at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's that. I'm seeing that definitely. And that's just, it's not, they have to really examine what they're considering an inconsistency. Okay. Because again, they're locking these people into time. Like, for example, we know Mary Magdalene appeared at the tomb at least 2 times. She went back and forth. Okay. She went in there once, she saw the angel, she went back, encountered Jesus. Okay. So we know that, but a lot of people will say, well, wait a second. Oh no, it's an inconsistency. Here she didn't see Jesus and there she did see. Well, yeah, that's because she went, then she returned to the apostles, told them what she saw, then she came back. So
right.
It's really poor reading of it, actually. So here we go.
But I can see why people would stop believing in Jesus because of this, though. I'm starting to understand how this would affect somebody's mind in their faith in Jesus if they listen to a person like Jim Agers. You know what I mean? The simple reading of the Gospels would kill that automatically, because you can read for yourself and see why what he's saying is just ridiculous. Yeah,
and I've been able to, and I know that some scholars don't think this is a good idea, but I've actually been able to easily reconcile all of these accounts. You put it down on a piece of paper and you say, okay, this one said this. For example, even with the birth narratives, I can take Matthew and Luke, and I take part of one of them and part of the other one, and they actually go in order, but each of them reports a little bit different part of the story. And so people are trying to come up with inconsistencies where there are none. And so
exactly.
So here we go.
Is that they're not there at all when they arrive at the tomb. They go inside enough to look around and know that Jesus isn't there, and then poof, right there next to them. Those are not small inconsistencies.
These aren't inconsistencies at all, because again, they appeared in the empty tomb over hours. Okay, Jesus, he keeps locking them in time. This freaks me out. It's just so wrong. Such a ridiculous interpretation. But sorry,
and no evidence has been provided for none of this yet. Well, let's continue.
Yeah,
but they are miraculous. If you look at the other inconsistencies in the tomb narrative, they're miraculous as well. I mean, all the way down to who.
So he's actually granting the tomb so that he can say that these are inconsistencies. However, then he's going around and saying, then there was no tomb. What?
That's why I said I killed this. That's why I was like, oh God, this was a massacre. This was a massacre.
It was bad. It was bad. So I'm going to grant you the tomb so I can talk about the 2 angels and the rock and all this kind of stuff. And then I'm going to say there was no tomb. Hello.
You know who would have been a better opponent for him? And they are an atheist who has a little bit more experience with debating the smarter part of the Christian community. I think Alex Botton would have did a better job and that's a compliment to him, because I don't even think he's a good debater. But on this particular topic, I think Alex Botton's a guy who lives in the UK. He's an atheist. He used to have a show called Fundamentally Flawed, and he had people on his show like Saitan Brudicate and people like that on his show. And he's much better at what Jim is attempting to do than Jim. I don't think Jim should ever debate this again, ever, because you can't convince people that your point is right if you're not backing it up with some type of sources. Everything that's coming out of his mouth is sheerly speculation and opinion. It's not based on anything.
Yeah. And he doesn't have any proof that any of these are contradictions. He's asserting. He's not even thinking about the whole story and how it is reported that they were going back and forth over a period of time to these tombs, to the tomb. I mean, so
he's got to meet his burden of proof. He has to.
Yeah, and he hasn't.
Move the stone. And Mark, the women are wondering, well, who's going to move it for us? Matthew answers that question with what? With a miracle. With Jesus arising, if Mary didn't go and get the disciples. If Peter and the other disciple didn't race back to the tomb to confirm Mary, then it would just be women who knew about the tomb, and Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, none of which.
That's
leave
an
us any
argument
doubt.
against the resurrection. It is not an argument against where he was buried.
Yeah, and it's also he
Okay.
also is assuming now he forgets the part that the women were hanging out with the men in that place. Okay, the women and the men were hanging out together in that shelter where they were hiding. Okay,
Yeah.
so women were there, and that's reported multiple times. So Jim's assumption that the men didn't know where the tomb is here is, I mean, really? Like no one's going to tell him, oh, by the way, he's being, just because the Bible doesn't present the men following Joseph of Arimathea like the women did, doesn't mean that the men were unaware. It would be silly to think that they would never have said, oh, by the way, he's buried over here on X Street. So
I think he has PowerPoints on his computer, and I think he took some PowerPoints from the arguments against the resurrection and some PowerPoints against where he was buried, and he's mixing them together. Oh God, it's just continue.
yeah, I think that, well, actually, in all fairness to Jim, he did, apparently his computer broke or something right before the debate, and all of his preparation work was lost. And so,
Oh, okay. All right.
so right now
That
we're getting what he's got from memory.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. Okay.
So that's okay. Here we go.
Why? And additionally, why is there no transmission of the location of the tomb? Well, why is that not a highly venerated site?
Argument from silence here, wouldn't you say? I mean, he's assuming the apostles, we know the apostles knew where the tomb was because Peter and John ran to the tomb. Okay, so we know they know where it was. But he's pretending that because there wasn't like a physical or a verbal, oh, hey, Mary right now is informing Peter where the tomb is. And we don't need that. Clearly she must have done it, or they wouldn't have been running to the tomb where they knew where it was.
And obviously some of the disciples wrote about it in the gospel. So
Exactly.
oh boy. Anyway, let's continue.
When there are communities of Christians there in Jerusalem that stuck it out with the Jews. They didn't all leave. Sure, some of them left. Quite a few of them left. People with small children with families, but there were people who stayed and fought. And they would.
I'd love to hear his source. Let's just keep going here so we can hear his source. Now I think he's talking about the Jewish Diaspora, and after the year 70, when they all pretty much had to leave Jerusalem. And so he's saying some of them stuck around. Well, great. Show us the evidence. Let's see if he's got it.
Would maintain their traditions, their house churches. What we have inscriptions and graffiti and all kinds of archaeological evidence for the presence of Christian communities.
Oh, we definitely have the presence of Christian communities in the ancient Near East. Okay, so there's no doubt about that.
Is he suggesting that church history is incorrect and that there was no home churches during the Jewish diaspora?
Yeah, I'm actually really kind of unclear on what he's trying to get at here.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out.
I would say we agree with him. I agree. Here's what happened. In the year 70, a lot of people dispersed. Okay. He's saying not all of them dispersed. And it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible that not all of them dispersed. It's possible there were still some house churches around in that region for sure. I mean, we know there were because we have evidence of that from the what do they call, the church fathers.
We can go to the book of Acts and we can look at how they had a council in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm not understanding where he's. Anyway, let him continue because I want to see his evidence for the things that he's saying.
Oh,
he has to provide.
I think now that I think about it, I know where he's going right now. He's going to try to say because there is a continual presence of Christians in the area, they should have known where the empty tomb was. Now, I actually think there's a pretty good case for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre being the site of the empty tomb, because that's what Constantine's mother had picked out. And I think that she probably did her due diligence on the work. She was within 300 years of this whole thing. And so I think that's probably a pretty good case for that. And so,
what I'm concerned about? I'm concerned about him sitting at the right hand of the Father. That's what I'm concerned about, not where he was necessarily buried, because the rocks are not going to give you supernatural powers if you touch them. If you walk in there, you're not going to gain all this wisdom. We should be concerned about the fact that he lives in us via the Holy Spirit, and he also is sitting at the right hand of the Father. their focus and the things that they are concerned about is not even relevant. But going back to the actual debate that he's having, the closing statement that he's making regarding IP, his argumentation doesn't go against where Jesus was buried again. He's just all over the place at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
Through the Jewish wars. With being said is, I mean, the topic of the debate is, was Jesus buried in a tomb? I don't know. Well, do you have a tomb? Like, is there a tomb that we can examine? We can look at the descriptions in the Gospels and put it up against it and see if perhaps this is it. Or
I mentioned before, there's two contenders. It's one or the other. It's either the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or there's another site that they think that maybe that could be it too. But I still think that we've got a pretty good case for that. And so I don't know where Jim's going with this. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. Before I came in here, I was looking at the where the site actually is, and scientists are actually saying that there's one of two sites that they actually have. So again, I don't think he did a lot of research for this debate. Obviously, the apostles knew where he was buried, and they was more concerned with the fact that he was risen than knowing where this site was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
good point. Okay.
Maybe date the limestone, or date something that would place it around the early to mid 1st century, because it was supposed to be a new tomb that Joseph of Arimathea made for himself. I mean, there has to be something that we can weigh this textual evidence, because when the textual evidence is so full of embellishment and changes for personal gratification, they're not. These are not people teaching history. These are people preaching mystery. It's not. It wasn't meant to be historical, and we shouldn't accept it as historical.
On what? Based on what? Okay.
We shouldn't accept it as historical. Why?
Atheists always talk about evidence and proof, and why it's so important to have demonstrable and empirical evidence. He is providing none of that, and he is trying to convince us that this is just people preaching and these events never happened. If you believe that, then there has to be something to persuade you into believing those things. If you cannot provide us with something that we can look at, study, and negauge on or whatever, then everything that's coming out of his mouth right now is just biased skepticism. That's all it is. And it's a bias on atheism where he doesn't want it to be true. So
yeah, he doesn't want it. Actually, you just nailed it right there. He doesn't want it to be true. I know a couple agnostics in real life, and they don't want it to be true. They really don't. And I'm like, why? You live a perfectly fine life. You're a nice person. Why? Why don't you want it to be true? I just don't want it to be true. I have got a couple relatives who are agnostics. So,
because it has more to do with them hating God's character than it does about whether or not he exists. If you talk to most atheists, they will tell you straight up, even if he did exist, they wouldn't worship him because they don't like him as a person. So if we can prove that Jesus actually walked the earth and that he did the things that he did and that he's really alive sitting at the right hand of the Father, they're going to tell you straight up, listen to me. Okay, you prove that Jesus existed. You prove he's the Messiah. You prove that he's God. You want to know what? I'm not going to worship him because I disagree with his morality. That's what you're going to ultimately get from them.
Well, there's one guy who's called Canadian Atheist. His name is Michael, and he's been on my channel before, but he's on Twitter. He keeps trying to get me to talk to him about morality and God. And I'm thinking, now I don't, and he says he's morally superior to God. I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, God's the source of our morality. You're not nobody here is morally superior. And I just think of Jesus, and I'm like, okay, I'll compare you to Jesus. I've yet to meet somebody who's morally superior to Jesus.
Can we get him on here next week?
Oh, well, next week you've got your debate with your friendly neighborhood atheist. Hey, yeah, if you want to join me, I'll get him on here with you. That'll be fun.
Oh, yeah, I would love to have a conversation with him on how he's more moral than God. I bet you he won't last, 5 minutes. I don't think he will.
Well, that'll be fun. Okay, so let's go. Here we go.
Cool. And we sure shouldn't give it the of reign that we would give something that would claim to be authoritative or to claim to be historical. there's just no good reason to suggest it. Jesus was poor. Joseph of Arimathea voted to kill him. Why would he give him his tomb, especially when in some of the accounts, it seems like Joseph of Arimathea was a Jesus follower when Jesus's followers weren't Jesus followers. It's
We've
I
already
don't know.
covered
There's
that.
a lot of holes, way too many holes for me to say, yeah, Jesus was probably buried in a tomb. Right now, it seems the most reasonable thing to say is,
okay, can we pause
no,
this a minute?
we don't have sufficient evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim Majors, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Jim Majors. I'm not trying to like disrespect the atheist community. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of advice. If you want to prove that Jesus Christ was not born in a tomb, go study some archaeology. Okay, and then after you do that, get your history. And after you get that, get the actual claims that the Bible actually makes. Your opinions and your cliff notes version of what happened in the Bible don't count. You got to be able to provide some type of historicity in order to be able to prove your point. Okay, just wanted to say that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but this was just horrible.
Yeah, and just to even point out, mentioning you, piggybacking off what you're saying with this idea of archaeology, one of the things that William Ramsay did, this is Sir William Ramsay in the 18th century, or no, the 19th century, is he set out to disprove the Bible. And he went down to the ancient Near East and he started doing a lot of archaeological digs and looking at cities and all this kind of stuff. And he looked at the book of Acts and he looked at Luke and he looked at the Gospels, and he actually became a Christian because of it, because he realized what an incredible historian that Luke was in the book of Acts, and how he cited all of these little minor cities and these places, and he was accurate in everything. And so Ramsay actually decided he was to become a Christian after doing all of this investigation.
Amen and amen. Let's listen to the rest of his statement.
Hey, I want to say Digital Hammurabi is in the audience, Josh, and I know you said something like you wanted to get in a debate with Josh. Josh, just to let you know, we're going to throw it out there. G-Man would like to debate you on slavery in the Bible.
Oh yeah, and my reasoning for wanting to debate him on slavery in the Bible, that's the one that wrote the book, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I believe that a lot of people don't understand slavery and don't understand slavery in the Bible and don't even understand slavery in America. So I would love, I'm salivating at having that conversation, because maybe I can change his mind about a couple of things. Who knows?
Yeah. And I also want to say, Dalton Horton, I like that you said the reason you believe in Christianity is because you had an encounter with God, just like me and many other Christians. Yes, I have had multiple encounters. And so that is actually why I came to Christianity. I came to apologetics, though, because I want to convince others, because they don't believe me. So I have to try to find other ways to convince people that they might find evidence.
Actually, you said at 5:30 you're going to wrap this up. Or are you going to?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So here.
24. So.
Yeah, it's my anniversary, everybody. 17 years with my hubby. We're going to go out to dinner for the first time since March, but we're going to sit outside. We're sitting outside. So thank you. All right, here we go.
Congratulations.
And thank you guys so much, both the moderator and my interlocutor. You were both a pleasure.
Okay. So G-Man, I'm going to go ahead and put us back into the other screen to see if anybody has any comments or questions. I've got a few more minutes here, so let's see. Stop share. I'm going to put.
All right, cool.
Let me just turn this off. Hold on. I want to get back over to. Okay, here we go. I'm in the live chat right now. Back with you guys. And does anybody have any questions, thoughts? Oh, wait. It's Josh says he appreciates that, G-Man, so he would probably like to debate you on slavery in the Bible.
Yeah, and you're probably going to hear from your partner, Skylar, that I got pretty mad at him on this show. And he said that he was going to talk to you and you wasn't going to talk to me or whatever. And I said, you know what? You don't get to talk to me now. As long as you want to come on here, man, you can have a intellectual conversation. I'll talk to anybody. I just don't want to have a conversation with somebody who's going to waste time. Because if I'm wrong, show me why I'm wrong so I can move on with my life. And if you're wrong, hopefully I can get you to adjust your beliefs a little bit. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's wishing me a happy anniversary. I appreciate that. Hopefully we'll have many more years and all that kind of good stuff. It sounds like I'm in an echo chamber. Is the sound really bad here? Do you hear that, G-Man?
No, I got people in the background that you hear though. So that's why I'm muting when I'm not talking.
Okay. Okay. Oh, well. All right. Well, everybody, I want to say thank you. G-Man is going to be here next week. He is debating Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist on my channel next week. And we're going to try to get something going with Josh here too. That was just in the chat. We're also going to try to get something with Canadian Atheist. So we've got some stuff to work out. So that's great. So G-Man, do you want to let anybody know what you're working on now or how people can find you?
Yes, again, on the G-Man channel, I'm presently doing a G-Man versus secular religions. I covered, I believe, Buddhism, atheism, and what is it, Scientology. Next week, I'm probably going to be dealing with Luciferianism or Satanism. So if you want to hear about that and hear about how the best way to go about witnessing to these people, all you got to do is go to the G-Man channel, hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and hit all. And I would greatly appreciate also if you guys would subscribe to S.J. Thomas, and if you're not subscribed, and hit the notification bell and hit all so that you can catch up with everything that's going on with this YouTube channel.
Yeah. So thank you so much. So that's good. And I see Digital Hammurabi says, feel free to have you email him a proposal if you'd like to discuss slavery. And so figure out exactly what topic it would be. I think it might be this idea of God endorsing it versus God tolerating it.
Actually, I'll be quite blunt in what my argument is going to be. My argument is that biblical slavery, the slavery that was mentioned in the Mosaic Law, is not immoral. It was quite moral, what God prescribed. Now, I can show you immoral slavery happening in the Bible too, the kind of slavery that God does not condone, and we can talk about that on this YouTube channel. I have no problem with that because I'm very specific about how I go about separating things.
Okay, good. And I guess I'm still in this bad echo chamber. I'm sorry about that, everybody. I want to say, don't forget to look at Cam and Cam's response to IP. So we're going to have to look at that at some point too. He's got a response there. And so thank you guys.
Can we get links for that? Because I'd like to look at it.
Yeah, he's got a link in the chat. He's got a link under Digital Gnosis. So you can see that link. Oh, Stephen Rivard has 10 questions. Stephen, I haven't gotten to that yet, but I still plan to get to a lot more of what you sent. So that's definitely part of the plan. And so, all right. So I want to say thank you, everybody. Please like, subscribe, and do come again. You guys have a good one. Okay. Well, we're off.